Today I would like to talk to you on law number 2 of teamwork. That is the law of the big picture. And the law of the big picture says the goal is more important than the role. I love this law because as I watch teams, many times I watch them totally lose perspective. And somehow, and this happens to me, this can happen to anybody, somehow we begin to think that what we do as a part of the team begins to be more important than anything else. And we get kind of consumed with our job, and we get consumed with our role, and we become what I call role conscious instead of goal conscious. What I want you to understand about this law is that any time you lose perspective, any time you fail to see the big picture, almost always you fall into the rut of feeling that what you're doing is most important. In fact, you know what the number one challenge I think of a leader is when working with a team? I believe the biggest challenge is keeping the big picture in front of the team at all times. Because isn't it true, there's a tendency for us just to lose the big picture. And again, begin to get consumed in our job and what we're doing and just fail to see the big picture. For example, in the Enjoy group, one of the things we found that was very helpful is if we have people working in the stock room with our products, for example, or some of the people perhaps making phone calls and registrations or filling in data entry in computers. Here's what we found. One of the most important things we can do every once in a while is to get them out of that seat or whatever their job is and take them to a conference and let them see the big picture. Let them see how important they are to making it all happen, but let them see the big picture. Because when we fail to see the big picture, when we lose perspective, almost always we'll put our role above the team's goal. Let me give you, I love this piece. This is one of the funniest pieces on perspective that I've ever read, and it's a wonderful story. So let me just read it to you, okay? This is a story of a girl in college who's in a little trouble, and so she's writing to her mother at home. Okay, dear Mom, since I've been away at college one full semester, I think it's time to bring you up to date as to what is going on. Shortly after I arrived at college, I got bored with dormitory life, and I stole $10 out of my roommate's purse. With the money, I rented a Honda bike and crashed it into the telephone pole a few blocks from the college. I broke my leg, but was rescued by a young doctor who lives upstairs from the apartment house on the corner. He took me in, nursed me back to good health, set my leg, and thanks to him, I'm up and around again. We wanted to let you know that we're going to be married as soon as possible, since we're having some trouble on the blood test because there's a disease that keeps showing up. We do hope, however, that we will be married before the baby arrives, and we will be home shortly thereafter to live with you and Dad. I know you will love the baby as much as you have me, even though it will be of a different religion. Please try to understand the reason we are having to come home and stay with you and Dad is because my doctor friend wants out of medical school because of all the attention he was giving to me and my condition. Really, Mom, I didn't steal $10 from my roommate's purse, or rent a Honda bike, or hit a telephone pole, or break my leg. I did not meet a young doctor of a different religion, nor are we going to be married. There is no disease or test or baby to worry about. And I won't be home to live with you and Dad, and he won't be either. Mom, I am getting a D in geometry. And I'm getting an F in geology. And I wanted you to accept these grades in their proper perspective. I love that story because it's a story of keeping things in proper perspective. As a leader working with your team, you've got to keep the big picture. They have to constantly see perspective, or they will begin to think their role is more important than the team goal. So in your notes, my role as a team member must always submit to the goal of the team. classic illustration. It's just a recent one. It's a sports one, but it'll work. The Los Angeles Lakers this year won the NBA World Championship. They have two great players, Kobe and Shaq. Now, these two players probably, arguably, are the two best players in the NBA. But throughout the season, much of the year, they didn't win. They weren't very successful. They had a little bit of a winning record, but everybody knew they weren't reaching their potential. You know why? Because Shaq and Kobe were arguing over their role on the team. They were arguing who the star was and who was the player that really made it happen. Now, as they got close to the playoffs, they settled their differences. They put them aside. And they began to play team ball. And all of a sudden, they went on a winning streak that broke a playoff record. Why? I can tell you what happened. What happened was these two highly individually gifted, talented ball players understood that their role was not as important as the goal of winning a championship. I promise you, if they would have not become servants in their role and submitted their role to the goal, they would have not won the world title. You see, when it comes to leading, this is very important. If you are a person that thinks that you lead by position, and I run into people like this all the time, they say, well, you know, I'm the president of the company. Well, it's my title. It's my job. And if you're a position kind of a leader, let me say something to you. You're going to always be into the role. And you're always going to be saying, well, now, you follow me because you're under me, and here's where I am, and here's where you are on the pole. And you will always be putting your role up ahead of the goal. And this is not what you want to do. Here's what I want you to understand. Great leaders often submit their role as a leader in a servant's way to someone else to facilitate and add value to the team. It's what I call this the myth of the head table. There's a myth that says basically if you sit at a head table, if I happen to be the leader of this organization, this company, and this is my head table chair, you know, it's kind of the end of the table, whatever, it kind of means that I'm always leading. Here's what I want you to understand. There's no such thing as a head table where the leader always leads. We've already shared that in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, not everybody does all 21 laws well. So therefore, what that means is there are many times when I submit my role as the designated leader to someone else because they're going to do a better job than I am. And I must understand it's the goal of the team that's more important than my role as a leader. So in your notes, here's the way this works. A servant leader, and I think this is the best way to describe what I'm trying to teach in law number 2. A servant leader serves the mission and leads by serving those on the mission with him. That is so good. Let's talk about it for a moment. Because I have a goal in the law of the big picture, and that is by the time you're done understanding this teamwork law, my goal is every person who has a role, whether it's a big role or a small role, every person understands that you always submit your role to the benefit of the team. Now, here's a classic illustration, gang. Recently, I spent some time in London. It's one of my favorite cities because my wife, Margaret, and I both love history. And when you go to London, and if you go to London, one of the things you really want to do, because I love history and because I love leadership, one of the people I love to read after and study is Winston Churchill. What an incredible leader he was. I mean, that man, I believe, all of Europe owes their democracy and freedom to Winston Churchill. And he stood up to the Germans, he stood up to Hitler, he stood up and against odds, determined that England would not be taken by the Nazis. Now, when you go to London, there's a place in London where during the war, Winston Churchill met with his war, what he called his war cabinet, underneath a major building. It's in a bunker. Now here's what I want you to, when you go, you've got to see this. In fact, it just inspires me every time I see it. When the war came on, World War II, and England realized that they were in major difficulties and they had major challenges, Winston Churchill went under this major building. It was all bunkered with steel and with concrete for their protection. And he said, I must put with me on my team in this bunker for the next several years, and for this one I think it was about 5 years, he said, I must bring the best team members with me. So here's what he did. He chose 7 other men that were the greatest minds of England to go under the bunker and live with him and stay with him until he could help England come to victory. Now, here's what I want you to understand. He didn't choose his best friends. Some of the people that he put on his cabinet war room team were political enemies. But he said, this is not a time for politics. This is not a time for Democrat and Republican. This is not a time for pettiness and division and politics. He said, I've got to get the best minds in this war room because we've got to bring England together. Here's a man who understood the goal is more important than the role. In fact, what's interesting is one of the men who was on his cabinet war room team, one of the men, as soon as the war was over, defeated him and became the next prime minister. In other words, he worked right alongside a person who would take his job after the war was over. But it was okay with Winston Churchill because he understood that the goal is more important than the role. Now, what I'm saying to you is, as you go out and work with your team, for example, if this is my team right here, if this is my team, what I have to understand is, what's your name? Missy. Okay, Missy, what's your name? Fran. Fran? Chris. Okay, if I've got Missy, Fran, and Chris, and they're all on my team, and I'm doing the 21 airfield ball as a leadership, maybe Fran is better at the law of navigation than me. So when I come to the law of navigation, when we have to navigate something, we have to go from point A to point B to point C to point D. Now, when that happens, gang, here's what I do. Do I have the role of the leader? Of course. I'm maybe the owner of the company. Maybe I'm, quote, the boss. I'm the founder. I don't know who I am, but I'm the head hoopah, okay? But when it comes to navigation, if from a 1 to a 10, I'm a 3, but Fran is a 9, what that means is I give up my role as a leader. And I say, Fran, and I tell the rest of the team, Fran will be leading us. And Fran's going to navigate, and I give the leadership baton to her, and you know what I do? I serve Fran, I follow Fran, I take her directions. Why? Because the goal is more important than the role. Can I tell you something? Many teams suffer indefinitely sometimes because the leader doesn't understand this law. We serve one another, we give, and we take. For example, in the Enjoy group, I have a fellow by the name of John Hall who excels in relationships. He's the best relationship guy on my whole Enjoy group team. He's the president of Equip. So if there's a relationship issue to deal with, guess who I hand the baton off to? I give it to John and say, go for it. I have another guy who's the president of Enjoy Stewardship Services, another company that I have. His name is Dave Sutherland. He is a strategic genius. So if there's strategy to be involved, what do? I take the baton and I hand it off to Dave and I say, you're the strategy guy. Strategically, take us to where we need to go. I have another guy who's the president of my organization called Enjoy, named Kevin Small. Kevin is major in looking for opportunities. So when I need an opportunity, when we need to expand, when we need to grow, when we need to flex our muscles, when we need to do a new thing, what do? I take my baton and I say, Kevin, here's the baton. You take it. You're the leader. Tell me what I need to do. I'm following. I'm on your team. Let me support you. How can I serve you? I have a wonderful lady who's been my assistant now for many years named Linda Eggers. She handles all the details of my life. So therefore, when there are details to be handled and arrangements to be made and appointments to be set, what do? I say, Linda, you're the leader. Tell me where to go. And she says, go. Tell me how long to stay. Call me when I should come back. Send me a map. You know what I'm saying? She does it all. Why? Why? Because she's better at that than I am. My brother, who excels and has been for many years a successful businessman, when it comes to a business plan, when it comes to somebody to give me strategic advice on the business, I bring Larry into the room and I say, okay, Larry, help me out. How would you do this? And because of his experience and because of his success in business, he says, John, here's the business plan. And he maps it out for me. Why? Because he's better at it than I am. when it comes to consulting people, especially pastors. I've got a guy named Dan Ryan on my team who has for years consulted them. And so when a pastor says, what should I do about this? I say, hey, Dan, here's the baton. Now, here's what I'm saying. It's very important for you as a leader to know all the strengths of your people. It's very important for you to know their temperament. It's very important for you to know their gifts. It's very important for you to know their abilities. And then it's very important for you to utilize them effectively. And you utilize them effectively by passing the baton off them and saying, not saying, well, I'm the leader, so therefore I should always lead. Hello. That's like saying, I'm the leader and I have all the answers. Can I tell you something? I don't want to be on your team. This would not be a very fun team. So in your notes, the law of the big picture basically says successful teams look up at the big picture. That's the first thing they do. Then they size up their situation. Then they line up the needed resources. Then they call up the right team members. Then they give up their personal agenda. And then they step up to the next level. And I love the teamwork thought in your notes. When you see the big picture correctly, you will serve the team more quickly. And then there's always a question in each one of these laws. And here's the question for the big picture. Do I place the team above myself? It's a great question. It's a teamwork question.